Thank you very much. A very good morning, everybody. I hope you can bear with me now. I'm going to talk about governing resource conflict in Asia. So let's forget Spain at the moment and let's travel to Asia. Okay, are you ready? Okay. Conflict is a governance issue. This is one of the most difficult challenges that we are facing when we are talking about good governance. This is because our landscape, forests, are full of different expectations and interest. And oftentimes, one interest cannot be fulfilled at the same time. People are losing out, people cannot materialize what they want on their landscape. And that's why conflict will be with us probably forever. The challenge is really how we go about steering this conflict, managing this conflict. Because if we fail to do so, conflict can be extremely detrimental to any effort that we are doing at international levels or at local level. However, many studies have also shown that conflict, in fact, can be very positive, can be a tool for transformation. And this is a challenge for everybody in managing their landscape. Let's talk a little bit about a question: how serious is the issue? Well, if you've ever been to Cambodia, a study showed that in 2009, they recorded almost more than 200 conflict cases related to forest and land, and 60% of those conflicts were violent. In Indonesia, a country where I come from, about 12 to 20 million people are affected by forest-related conflict. Imagine how many people live in Spain, and this amount is a lot. People were killed, people have to leave their villages, or people have to move to other places because of this conflict. So this is indeed an extremely serious issue in Indonesia. Thailand, the country where I live at the moment, 1.3 million hectares of forest settlement or villages overlap with protected areas. This means that people who live in those areas are considered illegal settlers. They've lived there for hundreds of years. But recently, when the government said that this is protected area, this is national park, suddenly they become illegal on their own land. In total, in Asia, 75% of forests affected by violent conflict. So this is really a serious governance issue that we are facing, and I would like to discuss with you a little bit more when we talk about our future endeavor like RED+. What does it mean for us? What does it mean in practice? So because the conflict is so serious, if you go to any capital cities in Asia, then you will read newspapers and this kind of news will be very prominent. For example, Jakarta Post in Indonesia often report conflict between local people or indigenous people with oil palm plantation company. In Phnom Penh, in Cambodia, many farmers are rallying to sort of get back their rights that has been taken over by various development agencies. In Thailand, there is a serious issue at the moment that people want to, land redistribution. Land under the control of the state comprises of more than 90% of the whole land in the country. Okay, this is one thing that I would like to discuss with you and that already came up from yesterday's discussion. Communities and indigenous people often have the most to lose in the battle in this conflict, but least power to win the game. This is the reality. So over the past 2.5 years, RECOTFC, together with various other partners in Asia, have done or have started to do a comprehensive research to look into specific type of conflict, which was conflict between community and outsider, as I call it. By outsider, I refer to non-community stakeholders like governments, land developers, logging companies, mining companies, etc. What we wanted to know, among others, are what are the impacts of those conflicts so far, what are the underlying causes, and how are those conflicts have been managed so far, and what are the outcomes. Understanding of those elements are important in the future course of governing the landscape. So we did case study, and this is an ongoing studies in 6 countries. If you look at there, from China, we did a study in Inner Mongolia. We look at the conflict between herding communities and government over grazing. And we have a number of research in the Mekong region, like Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam, where we look at different types of community outside of conflict between community and mining companies, conflict between community and rubber plantation, etc. And in Thailand particularly, we look at the conflict between community and indigenous people with protected areas. In Indonesia, we look at 2 cases. One was about conflicts between local community, indigenous people, and logging company, and another one with oil pump company, which is a big and serious business at the moment. Okay, so in summary, these are how the actors in the conflict look like. On the one side, we have local community or indigenous peoples. They are farmers, they are herders, they are forest users, and they are what Schimmer called poor people. Yeah? On the other side, we have company, or what I call outsiders, logging, mining company, plantation, like rubber plantation and oil palm plantation. These are, to make the situation a bit simplified, these 2 stakeholders are being supported by different agents, if you like. Local communities are often supported by local NGOs, international NGOs who believe in the indigenous rights, advocacy organization, etc. On the other side, what we found out was companies or private sector were supported by government, like forestry administration, protected area administration, etc. But not only that, this is what is interesting, they are also supported by military and police. So you see the power constellation in this conflict, and you know what to expect in this battle over land and forest. So what are the impacts of those conflicts? I'm not going to tell everything, but one very interesting quote that we got from Thailand. This is a village, head in one of the case study areas. He said, suddenly I saw the forestry officer approaching me. With panic, I ran as fast as I could. He was talking about, because the village where he lived is now protected area, and he is considered illegal to live in this area. So conflict brings about fear and anxiety to many local people. They are afraid of being chased by, officer or ranger. There are numerous other impacts. Conflict can also create disharmony among community groups. Some of the villages getting or receive money or support from the oil pump company or mining company, so they are actually for the company. Other villages who are actually against those companies, they are actually, not in a good relationship with their neighboring villages. So this is actually, say something that conflict actually creates social disharmony at local level. It is also often associated with high economic cost. People who are affected by those conflicts, they have to leave. They have to leave everything behind. Or in the case where they have to negotiate, they don't have money to travel to capital city. They have to leave their farming behind. And oftentimes, some in the extreme cases, their villages were burned. It's very high impacts. On the community side, also high economic and financial impacts. Many operations had to close down because they could not handle the social issue. So you imagine the economic cost of this conflict. And then the other one is environmental degradation. In cases where people are unsure about their rights, who have right to this forest, they will extract as much as possible as long as they can. So this actually accelerates environmental degradation in many cases. So the next question is, what causes all this conflict? And I would like to bring you into one quote that we heard from a leader in Laos. He said, "I fought for my country for more than 30 years. I've served as a village chief, yet when authority come here, they walk in through my gate, paint and mark it with paint, then they say my land must be used for conservation." So the causes of the conflict, one of the principal causes is the unclarity on who owns the forest or who owns the land. Is that my land or is that your land? Who entitled to do things on this land is not clear. And in other cases of conflict, also a lack of coordination among state agencies. And I'll give you an example from Cambodia. A mining company got a permit from the Ministry of Energy and Industry. On another side, local community got their community forest approved by the Forestry Administration on the same piece of land. So the question is, how these two agencies, why do they not work together? And there's another issue, national and global versus local interest on conservation and economic development. If you see in many cases in Thailand, conservation is aimed at serving national and international demand on protecting a forest, like in many other countries. But at the same time, local community have needs and aspiration on this land. And finally, as I said before, we are living in an area where tenure is not yet clear and still contested. And adding to these new schemes, adaptation, mitigation scheme, REDD+ or whatsoever, can you imagine the formula is become more complicated? I just would like to show to you in those 8 cases how they have managed the conflict. And this table shows to you that there are many means and approaches have been tried to resolve the conflict, like negotiation, mediation, or avoidance. Villagers just say, it's no use to engage in this conflict. We have nothing, And in some cases, more powerful actors use coercion. They just, ask with military people, you go out of this place because this is logging concession. And recently, what was very interesting was also co-management, like my colleague Shimea said. It was actually possible to bring actors together and find a joint solution through co-management arrangement. And this I will show to you out of these 8 conflict cases that we studied. There are only 3 cases that have been sort of successfully resolved. And this says something to us. In many cases, we cannot address landscape conflict, and this is serious issues. And I can tell you, the one case in Thailand, number 7, it took 21 years to resolve this conflict. Can you imagine? 21 years. In East Kalimantan, it took 24 years to come into agreement between communities and those big logging concessions. So, a key message here, if we are not prepared with conflict, if we don't anticipate conflict, no matter what scheme we are doing, whether it's model forest or REDD+, we will be facing this challenge. So I would like to discuss, maybe not now, a little bit a provocative question to all of us. So conflict, better or worse under REDD+? We are grappling with this question. And what I can say is it depends on how we address outstanding governance issues that I have outlined and other colleagues have been mentioning. Are we able to address the issue of local and indigenous people, the issue of rights to carbon, the issue of who owns the land? If so, I think REDD+ will have a very bright future, and otherwise we have a lot of homework to do. Way forward, based on this research, we propose in the short term or immediately any intervention should encourage early consultation with local residents. To ensure coordination among agencies, we have heard about this yesterday, whoever, this new scheme, everybody should coordinate among themselves and harmonize their approach. Promote co-management arrangement, listen to local people, address their concerns, and try to also respect their cultures. And for government, I think they need to be neutral, not to take side, because many local people and other stakeholders expect government to be a mediator to facilitate all of this. And of course, in the long term, we have a lot of work to do. We need to clarify tenure arrangement and land use policies. And there is an opportunity, huge opportunity on this under REDD+. RED Plus will be a critical force that enable various actors to come together and renegotiate land use and land use management. It is also very clear that in Asia, mediation skill is lacking, and my very organization is working on that to strengthen the mediation skill across Asia. And as I said before, we need to respect local resource management and integrate local livelihood strategies into conservation policy. If conservation cannot guarantee people's securities or livelihood, it's doomed to failure. I would like to mention a number of institutions and organizations that have supported us so far in this research. This is an ongoing research that will go on, and we will be focusing more in the next year into looking at conflict in the context of RED Plus and climate change in general. With that, I thank you for your attention.